So I guess I'd like to start with an anecdote. Back in the 1970s, Newsweek magazine ran an article about Newton. It was a big cover page, and the caption for a picture of a woman standing in her driveway was Newton, Massachusetts, where liberalism stops at the driveway. The caption was referencing the way that many people in Newton enjoy seeing themselves as liberal and progressive and generally forward-thinking, but tend not to want to follow through on those ideals. I describe Newton as a socially liberal, financially conservative kind of town. Limousine liberals, if you would. We're keeping up appearances, but we won't really make changes that would disrupt the status quo. We've heard a lot of facts already, so I don't want to be redundant, but one of the more staggering ones you can hear about housing in Newton is that between 2003 and 2016, the median housing price skyrocketed from $638,000 to $1.1 million. Today it hovers around 1.3. The median income for a family in the greater Boston area is around $89,000, which is quite a lot nation average, but looking at that family trying to find a house here, they'd wind up spending about 70% of their monthly income on rent. And the numbers are even bleaker for families of color. The average Black or African American family makes less than $47,000 per year. When you look at a problem like that, sort of the immediate conclusion is, well, maybe they should just look for cheaper housing. Here's the thing, Newton suffers from a severe lack of housing supply, and public subsidized housing can only take us so far. Just half of the 420 households with housing vouchers administered by the Newton Housing Authority were able to find a home here. And when we start thinking about making new houses or converting existing residences into multi-unit, that's when things get tricky again. Newton's current zoning ordinance restricts the development of multifamily or multi-unit housing to specific areas of the city, leaving vast stretches to be solely used for single-family residences. If you're driving through an area like Nonantum, you'll notice houses with 2 entrances, 2 addresses, maybe even 3 or 4. They're not uncommon. You start driving down Com Ave, you notice that not only are those houses uncommon, they don't exist. That's the zoning. The history of our zoning matters now more than ever. In 1925, our zoning code was put into place with the intention of keeping out undesirable communities, people of color, Italians, and if you look at our current map of zoning that stems from that, it lines up disturbingly close to the redlining maps used by real estate agents to indicate high-risk areas, areas with high minority populations, places that aren't worth dealing with. Our current zoning severely limits our housing options, and its effects show on our community. The town's percentage of African American and Latino families are half the state averages, 3.1% and 5.5% respectively. We're rapidly losing low and middle income households and replacing them with upper middle and high. This trend has only increased over the past 2 decades and shows no sign of slowing down. We pride ourselves on our public schools and the opportunities they offer indiscriminately, but the cost of living here outweighs the tuition of most private schools. We box out the same communities that we try so desperately to understand, and all we're really left with is a savior complex-fueled impression of what they're supposed to be. For all the work Newton does on social issues, what's the fucking point in having a town that promotes inclusivity for demographics that can't even afford to live here?
Yeah.
I've spent the past year or so advocating for affordable housing in Newton. It's something that I had no idea was an issue until I learned about the housing crisis for a debate team, and something I'd have taken no steps to try and fix if I wasn't looking to buff up the community service section of my college application. But after sinking my teeth into the matter, I realized that housing is the intersection of issues that I've been taught to care so deeply about. Classism, sustainability, racial justice, so many more. Housing is one of the first steps towards making any substantial change on these issues at the local level. The opposition to many of the developments or zoning reforms tend to promote the ideas that 1, the character of Newton will be disrupted, and 2, Newton can't handle the increased congestion. These are real concerns, and I contend that without careful forethought, developments can be built that will have serious consequences. But I found that in my time advocating for these things, you kind of start to be able to read between the lines. Disrupting the character is rooted in, I like the image of my suburban paradise and I don't want it to change. Newton can't handle the increased density ties to, I don't want to see people who aren't like me all over my town. I don't mean to oversimplify the process through which affordable housing is implemented. It's one of, if not the most complex fields of work that I've ever engaged in. Steps necessary to enact meaningful change in Newton's housing market involve countless hours of planning and analysis, and it will take years before the change we advocate for now becomes tangible. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be pushing for every bit of affordable real estate and sustainable development we can get. I remember standing in City Hall one night in line to voice my support of the Riverside Project, which offered an opportunity to increase housing supply. As I stood there thinking of what to say, I was struck by the fact that I was one of maybe 3 people in the entire courtroom under the age of 50 As students, we represent the future of Newton. We're the ones that have the largest stake in what this town will look like 10, 20, or 30 years from now. And as such, we have an obligation to move Newton forward, not back. Thank you.